Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 14th, 2022 City Council meeting. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format, which enables the City Council to meet, hear from the community, and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. Anyone wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by following the access instructions listed for this meeting on the city's public webcast and meeting materials webpage. Tonight's meeting will include a public forum. If you wish to participate and haven't already done so, please raise your virtual hand now to join the speaker's queue in one of two ways. For those viewing the meeting on a computer or other device, click once on the hand icon. For those listening to the meeting on a phone, press *9. We will continue accepting raised hands until 7:35. The meeting moderator will disallow any requests to speak that are made after the deadline. You will have 2.5 minutes to speak. As a reminder, speakers have the option of turning on your video when you are called on to provide testimony. As your turn is announced, the meeting moderator will temporarily promote you to panelist status, and you can unmute and turn on your video if you wish. And I encourage everyone to use this increased access in a responsible way. Our intent is simply to be able to see each other's faces as testimony is given. And finally, thank you everyone for your patience as we continue to use this virtual meeting format, although we're all hopeful that this is coming to a close. As always, feel free to contact any one of us individually or together via email or voicemail if there is testimony you were not able to provide or wish to get to us in a different manner. And now I will formally open this meeting with a land acknowledgement. Since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as Kalapuya Ilahi. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon, and continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We acknowledge the inherent political sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribal nations in the state of Oregon and all American Indian, Alaska Native people who live here. To begin this meeting today, I do have a ceremonial matter. March 31st is designated as Transgender Day of Visibility, and because council will be on break, this is the closest Monday council meeting when we can recognize and acknowledge that important day. And so I have a proclamation to read, and we'll do so now. Whereas on March 31st, 2021, President Joe Biden signed a presidential declaration proclaiming March 31 as Transgender Day of Visibility in the United States. And whereas March 31 is a day to celebrate transgender and gender diverse people and acknowledge their determination to live openly and authentically. And whereas March 31 is a day to honor and celebrate the achievements and resiliency of transgender and gender diverse people and acknowledge their determination to live openly and authentically. And whereas transgender people still face systemic barriers to freedom and equality, including high rates of violence, harassment, and discrimination in employment, housing, healthcare, and public accommodations. And whereas the crisis of violence against transgender women, especially transgender women of color, is a stain on our nation's conscience. And whereas the City Council of Eugene has a vision of a community that is welcoming and safe for everyone, Resolution 5174 in 2016, including transgender and gender diverse people, and whereas the City of Eugene has the highest rank in the Municipal Equality Index which measures how supportive an organization is of its transgender employees. And whereas, although we have updated our policies, we still need to improve our practices in every department and team so every transgender person can experience a sense of belonging in our workspaces and in the community. And whereas the City of Eugene has adopted policies to prevent discrimination against the transgender community, and whereas Eugene Police prioritizes investigating bias crimes, which includes those committed against transgender individuals, and whereas we are fortunate to have Transponder, a local transgender founded and led nonprofit in our city, and we benefit from the positive impact of the work they provide for our community. And whereas, whether or not one is a transgender person, family member, or ally, Transponder offers support, education, and connection to available resources. And whereas we recognize the bravery of all City of Eugene employees and community members who decide to live their lives without hiding their most authentic self. Whereas March 31 is an opportunity to acknowledge all the work and progress made while still recognizing there is much work to be done before transgender people will have the same access, rights, and safeties others enjoy. Now, therefore, I, Lucy Venus, Mayor of the City of Eugene, Oregon, do hereby proclaim March 31, 2022 to be Transgender Day of Visibility in Eugene, Oregon, and encourage all people to work together in the coming year to achieve greater progress in respecting, protecting, and welcoming transgender people in our community. Thank you all. Thank you. And now I appreciate the opportunity to read that proclamation and sets a good tone. So to begin, we have our first agenda item is committee reports and items of interest. I know there are a couple specific things to come up. I'm wondering if I see the manager. Let me just kick it off with the manager and then with Councilor Syrett, and then we'll move through the other councilors.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And I really appreciate that proclamation and the words and just taking a moment to recognize the transgender members of our community. And I know Transponder was one of the organizations I interviewed as part of my evaluation, and I know how important this day is. Celebrating seeing people is today, and on the 31st. So I appreciate it. Thank you for that. I also wanted to just highlight, I sent an email to you earlier today that was follow-up to your February 28th meeting, where you directed me to investigate ways you might be able to contribute to Ukraine in a humanitarian way and not take it from sister cities. So the email really shared some information about two things. The first is we have reestablished your council emerging needs fund. So we had invested more money in that during the supplemental budget, and it's my intention to keep that at about $100,000 every year, as long as we can sustain that, so that you can do things just like this and not have to wait for a long budget process to really address the things that are front and center for you in the moment. The second one is we did a little bit of research on organizations that are working in the Ukraine right now, and really am pushing, or not pushing, but recommending that we make that investment with direct relief. And I'm just gonna say a couple of things about this nonprofit. The first is it was founded in 1948 by an Estonian immigrant living in California who wanted to assist individuals struggling in post-war Europe. It's a humanitarian aid organization active in all 50 states and more than 80 countries, with a mission to improve the health and lives of people affected by poverty or emergencies without regard to politics, religions, or ability to pay. A couple of notable items: they are ranked by Forbes as having 100% fundraising efficiency rating. Charity Navigator has given them a 100-point score and named them one of the 2021 10 best charities. They have a 4-star rating. Fast Company rated them as being in 2019, the 3rd most innovative nonprofit, and they've won the Peter F. Drucker Award for Nonprofit Innovation. They're working with the Ukraine Ministry of Health right now and other groups in the region to provide requested medical aid from oxygen concentrators to critical care medicines while preparing to offer longer-term aid to people displaced or affected by the war. So based on everything we looked at, we felt like this was a really solid organization to be able to recommend to you, and you can do that through council contingency. I believe Councilor Syrett may introduce that motion.
Yes, let me turn to you, Councilor Syrett.
Thank you, Mayor, and I apologize. My effort to find a more comfortable place to sit, I have to put up with a fussy dog. Before I make that motion, I wanted to appreciate the mayor's proclamation. I have transgendered folks in my life who I love and care about very much, and it's important to me that we are creating a safe and welcoming environment for folks to be their authentic self, as the proclamation so eloquently put it. So thank you. And thank you, City Manager, for doing due diligence on our motion, and I really appreciate this recommendation. So I move to direct the City Manager to contribute $10,000 from the City Council Emerging Need Fund to the nonprofit Direct Relief for Humanitarian Aid and Relief in Ukraine.
Second.
I have to be on mute for that to work. All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful action to take, and appreciate staff for finding the appropriate beneficiary organization for that. Okay, I now have a few other counselors with hands raised. So I have Emily, Councilor Syrett, Councilor Semple, Councilor Keating, and then Councilor Ye.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the proclamation. That's very important, and I'm grateful to you. And glory to Ukraine. Thank you, City Manager. I think that's a perfect solution, and I'm proud to be part of it. When people are upset with us, which happens periodically, and they're mad, they write to us, we've ruined Eugene, or whatever their problem is, and then tell us they're going to vote us out of office. That's not true, because it closed on Friday to register to be on the primary ballot. And congratulations to 3 of my colleagues who are running unopposed and will keep their seats. And my condolences to Councilor Ye, who has an opponent. But only to the primary. Unlike the glorious Ward 1, which had 5 and then 7 people running. But I won. So where are you all that are going to vote us out of office? Why aren't any of you running? Can't you, galvanize anybody to run? No. So therefore, congratulations, Council. We're doing an A+ job. And I look forward to continue working with you. And the rest of you, come on, community involvement. If you really care that much, show me. Thanks.
Okay, Councilor Keating and then Councilor Ye.
Mayor, can you come right back to me, please?
I can.
Thank you.
Councilor Ye.
Yeah, thanks. I had 2 committees to make quick reports on. I gotta flip my screen here. So the long-awaited renewable natural gas facility is having a ribbon cutting if anyone is interested to come. So it is Wednesday, March 30th from 10 to 11 at the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is located at 410 River Avenue in Eugene. So if you want to come and see that, please do. I'm sure they will post it on their Facebook if you miss it. The second thing I wanted to point out was that at our last police commission meeting, we had a really fantastic presentation by Dr. Johnny Lake on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was not all specific just to police commission work. I think anyone who watched it would get something really valuable out of it. And you can just go to the police. You can go and watch the recorded video for that meeting if you're interested. And I would highly recommend it if that is a subject that is of interest or you want to learn more. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
That's great. Thank you very much. Councilor Keating, are you ready?
I think so, Mayor. Thank you. I want to thank you for the proclamation as well, and recognize the trans community members in my life, personally, professionally, politically. I see you, and I thank the mayor and our colleagues for recognizing the rights and presence of our trans community members well beyond 1 out of 365 days. March 31st is an important day, but it is a 365-day plus agenda. On that point, on our city council page, or excuse me, our City of Eugene page, when one does a search for transponder or trans rights, the first 4 or 5 things that come up are transponder tags to the automatic vehicle identification, the trans data that relates to transportation, and you have to dig a little deep to get to a community support letter featuring transponder, and finally, October 19th, 2020, a community safety initiative sessions, which featured a wide variety of local stakeholders, including transponder. What I would ask for, mayor and manager and colleagues, and I hope it doesn't need a council vote. I hope it's a reform in the right direction that is simply embraced. But on our headers of our webpage, everything from the airport to human rights, to police, to spay and neuter clinic, recreation, homeless services, human rights, community safety initiative, that we have space for the LGBTQIA plus community, and link directly to transponder and the good work that folks are doing in our community. That would be a request that I would welcome greatly, Mayor. And finally, it's nice to be back in town. It's a little bit of a shock. I got in last night at 1:45 in the morning, and today going out in the stores, I still double mask, and about half of our community were out there ditching their masks because there's no more state mandate. I would ask folks to please continue to take the global pandemic seriously and mask appropriately. And Mayor, I was in Washington, D.C. for the last 4 or 5 days and got to see the President of the United States on Friday and the Vice President Saturday morning. And not to be partisan in my comments, but I was pleased beyond words to hear the President advocate strongly for a unity, bipartisan agenda that addresses the opioid epidemic nationally, invests in mental health services across the board, supports veterans, and ends cancer as we know it, regardless of whether or not you have a D, an I, an R, or an N behind your name when you vote. I hope that's an agenda we can all get behind. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for that transgender proclamation. It's especially important when other states are trying to make it illegal, like in Texas. I think it's incredibly important to make statements like that. I too want to celebrate the MWMC RNG project. I think it's a great project. It's going to be incredibly beneficial for MWMC. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make the opening on the 30th. I have a work conflict. And then something else that Jennifer mentioned, which was the police commission, where we had Dr. Johnny Lake come and talk to the commission about discrimination and inequity. And I thought, you know, he came at it from a completely different place. And I've been through numerous of those kinds of trainings. And he came from a different kind of place that made you really be introspective and think about it from a different perspective. And kind of made it, for me anyway, it was very personal. And I was thinking about that afterwards and thinking this would be actually a really good thing to bring to the council. And I think that potentially that might be an interesting work session for us to have, at least part of a work session on and hearing what Dr. Lake has to say and I think it would be very informative to a lot of people within our community about how to frame that in your head, which is what I got out of it. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Mike. Oh, Councilor Clark, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I was not present for the police commission meeting, but would love to be pointed in the direction of the tape, Councilor Ye or Zelenka. I want to echo Alan's request that perhaps we hear from Dr. Lake as well. He's a friend and someone I have immense respect for. He and I get to have lunch 3 or 4 times a year and get together. And there was a time years ago where he was pulled over by an officer and didn't feel good about it. And so I went with him and sat with him when we spoke with the police auditor about it. Dr. Lake is one of the brighter people I know, and I think his perspective could help all of us. So I really agree with what both of my colleagues are saying. I love the guy. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Evans.
I would like to hear from the city manager as to what kinds of trainings are currently going on with this regard. I understand that Dr. Lake delivered that training to the police commission. I also know that there are several people in our community who have a variety of expertise around these issues. And, I think that we have to take a look at all of the resources that we have available and proactively plan to do this kind of engagement and education. And I think that we need to look at a variety of different perspectives on these issues because they're just not coming from one particular place or one particular consultant or person. I know Dr. Lake very well. I think he does a very good job, but I know that there's some other people who have some additional skills or different skills, should I say, that would provide the council with a much broader perspective on the issues that we face. I've been stopped 45 times in this community over the 36 years that I've lived here. I haven't been stopped in the last 10 years. I think I grew out of the profile. But I can tell you from personal experience, some of those stops have been appropriate and others were not appropriate. I was stopped walking. I was stopped as a passenger in a car that I was not driving, and the driver was not asked for her ID or insurance or anything else. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that needs to be addressed. And I don't want to point fingers at the police. I think most of our police do a very, very good job. But over the years, there have been some actors and some people who really, I don't think, should have been representing the city of Eugene and wearing that uniform. So I think we need to be very circumspect in terms of the kind of advice we get and who we get it from.
Manager, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I really appreciate those comments and wanted to let you know that we have been exploring the possibility and ways that we could do some diversity, equity, and inclusion training with the City Council as it lines up with a lot of the language that you changed last year in your vision and goals. One of the things that we've done over the last year and a half, probably almost 2 years now, is introduced a belonging training into the city staff for all city staff. It's an incredibly thorough training that has been put together and largely led by a group of staff out of the Employee Resource Center and HR and I. So one of the things that we've played with is there has been one that we did for boards and commission. We've been talking about how would we adapt that to your schedule time. So how do you do that in the chunks of time that you have, or do we schedule an outside of this your regular time to do this? And I'll just say, one of the things that's really valuable about doing these trainings is a lot of the personal introspection that you do and work you do and things you share. And that's a little bit more challenging in a recorded environment than some of the other trainings. So we have been exploring it. You can expect to see something coming up as we kind of figure out the best way to adapt that for you.
Thank you. Councilor Evans, yes.
In addition to that, I also want to know what we are doing in terms of training around the transgender community and people who are along the gender spectrum. I know that I'm very aware of the fact that a lot of the hate crimes that are happening and have been recorded, and a lot who have not been recorded or reported, are against trans people of color. And it's extremely disturbing that people are afraid to come forward and report assaults and other types of crimes that are happening to them because they are afraid of the people that they're reporting them to, and wanting to get some type of resolution to those kinds of activities that some people in our community feel that they have to engage in terms of denying a person their right to be in our community because of their choice of gender.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Ye.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot one thing. So on the 17th of March at 4 o'clock, Ninkasi is hosting a Pints for a Cause for Transponder, and we just heard that very awesome proclamation. So I just wanted to put it out there that if any counselors want to go, if they text me, I will be your designated driver. I'm not a huge fan of beer, but I'm happy to support those who do want to drink it. So let me know.
That's great. Thank you very much. If there are too many of us, it becomes a public forum, and we'll have to vote on an ordinance. So be prepared for that. Councilor Evans, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we had a long discussion about moving ahead in the work session, and you weren't able to log on in time. And I didn't know whether you wanted to speak to that since you didn't have a chance to speak in that work session.
Well, I would have liked to, but not being able to participate in the conversation because I couldn't get on makes it kind of hard for me to comment on what was said, which I would have liked to have done, but I've got some issues that I wanted to get out, but I think I'm a little bit late for that. So I appreciate the opportunity, Mayor, but I'm thinking that we will have further discussions on moving ahead. And at that point, hopefully the technology will be cooperative with me. And if it is, I'll be able to weigh in.
Great, fair enough. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry that you had struggled to get into that meeting. Okay, if everyone's had, I do have one quick thing. Council knows this. I will just share this for the public in case they don't, that in our conversation about our response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Council suggested that I write to the mayor of our sister city, Irkutsk, and I did do so. And so I sent that letter last week. I worked closely with our sister city president. I framed it, we have a longstanding relationship as a sister city. My understanding that as mayor, he's not responsible for waging this war, but he is, as our representative of our sister city, our closest diplomatic connection to the Russian government. And so therefore, the person that I was going to reach out to express our condemnation of that war. I also asked that that people should not be arrested for demonstrating peacefully, that we have seen reports that Russians are protesting the war, and that I asked that they not be penalized for that, and if they had been detained, that they be released. So I haven't heard back from him. I'm not really, I don't feel very confident that I will hear back from him. I will say that subsequently, the next day, I received a letter from the Consul General of Ukraine in San Francisco who made a somewhat similar request to us about suspending our ties with Ukraine and reaching out to the mayor of Irkutsk. And so I did also respond to the consul general, and I shared my letter that I had sent to Mayor Bolotov. So I haven't heard back from the consul general either on that. And I did make it clear to him that we had also committed $10,000 for relief efforts. So I can follow up with him again and let him know that where you have chosen to send that money. And with that, Councilor Keating, one more comment.
Mayor, thank you for the synopsis. I had the honor to read the letter before you'd sent it out. And I don't know if all my colleagues did. I would ask, not now because we're going to jump into public comment, but I would love to have that letter read into the record at your convenience, and to illustrate my appreciation of you and our colleagues for our spirited conversation about rebuking Putin's unjust war. I long to continue to explore a sister city relationship with a community in the Ukraine, but I got everyone on this call tonight one of these Ukraine flag pins. There's two versions. There's one with an American flag. It's a vertical version, and there's this one, the horizontal version. I just wanted to say, colleagues, how much I appreciated the spirited deliberation and debate from our last opportunity that we got together.
Thank you for that. And let's see, if we're clear now, I think it is time to put a consent calendar up for a vote. So motion?
Yep, and you'll see that we're gonna pull one set of the minutes because there was an error that needs to be corrected. So that will be reflected in this motion. I move to approve the items on consent calendar 1 minus the October 11th, 2021 minutes.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who am I missing? 8. There we go. Thank you. And that passes. Thank you. And now I believe we are ready for the public forum. The public forum is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the City Council on any city-related issues except for those items which have already been heard by a hearings official. When it is your turn, the moderator will announce your name and promote you to panelist status. Please state your name clearly and, for Eugene residents, your ward if known before beginning your comments. Again, each person will have 2.5 minutes to speak. If you are watching the meeting, the timer should be visible. A yellow light will come on when you have 15 seconds to complete your comments. The red light indicates the end of the 2.5 minutes. Those who have connected to the meeting via phone and don't have the benefit of seeing the timer, please be aware of that your microphone will be muted at the 2.5 minute mark. And it looks like we have 29 people with hands raised. So I will say what I say always, which is if you don't need to use the whole 2.5 minutes, it gives us a little more freedom in the timing to make sure that everyone has a chance to testify within the 90 minutes allotted for the public forum. So thank you very much for showing up and being ready to testify, and I will turn it over to Naya to moderate.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're going to start with Michael Havlick, followed by Catherine Dunn. But first, I'm going to show the list of speakers briefly, so you can see where your name is on the list.
Naya, is there any way you can expand that, blow that up so it's bigger? Yeah, there you go.
No.
No, okay.
It's not
page width.
Yeah,
page width up. Do it.
Oh, thank you. All right.
That's better.
And it looks like a couple people have raised their hand after the 7:35 cutoff. So if I lower your hand, that means you will not have an opportunity to speak tonight. but you can submit testimony in writing. Okay, so our first speaker is going to be Michael Havlick, followed by Catherine Dunn.
Good evening, Mayor Vinnis and members of the council. I'm Michael Havlick, representing Multifamily Northwest members living and working in all 8 Eugene wards. Wednesday, you'll be discussing renter protections. So tonight, I'll discuss phase 1 renter protections, registration, move in, move out, and rental references. First, housing providers have paid around $5,246,000 into the rental registration since 2005. And unfortunately, it can't provide us with useful data that we now need. I would encourage you to evaluate the costs and benefits of this program before expanding it. If we were to create a housing navigator position, the current funding stream of over $350,000 annually should be sufficient. Next, let's discuss move-in, move-out photo documentation. That's where you must photograph everything, otherwise you can't apply security deposits. I submit that you can't reasonably photograph every angle of every item in an apartment. It's too difficult to do. To illustrate, imagine that you rent a car. You rent a car and decide after driving away that there's a better use for the car's catalytic converter. And when you return the car without that part, the angry lot attendant says that you have to pay for that damage. You reply, hey, unless you have a photo that it was there when I drove away, I'm not responsible. Should the absence of a photo exonerate you from paying for damage you created? This is the exact situation you will be creating for property owners with this ordinance. Next, I'd like to talk about rental references. You should know that during the rulemaking for Portland's Fair, this became a contentious topic. I was there. Tenant representatives wanted references, but only if they were positive references, and not if they held information that could be derogatory. We did a tremendous amount of work on the form for references, only to have the document whittled down to a basic tenant ledger, which is really not what screening companies need. Do I think that housing providers should provide good documentation at move-in and move-out and provide rental references promptly? Yes, I do. It is best practice. But do I think it's fair to design a liability trap in the event these functions are not done the way Eugene wants? No, I don't. And this is what reasonable folks object to, and it's why people leave this business. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Next is Catherine Dunn, followed by Tom K. Ryder.
Good evening, Council. Catherine Dunn, Ward 5. As your council work session comes up on Wednesday, I urge you to postpone making any decisions until you have valid data available to you on renter protections. And also that landlords have an opportunity to be involved in discussions about proposals. You may think that landlords have had the opportunity to be involved, as in few of them were on the HPB's Renter Protection Committee. However, after reading the minutes of the HPB meetings, which I urge you to do, especially those in 2021, it's clear that landlords were in the minority, and the committee was stacked with renter advocates who resented the fact that the landlords were there because they were not in agreement with the majority. I want to read a quote from the 3/10/21 minutes. Quote, Ms. Boss mentioned that they were the Renter Protections Committee and their focus should be protecting renters and not worry about landlord response, end quote. So if you think you're getting input from an unbiased committee, balance between landlords and renter advocates, you're mistaken. You also have the renter experience survey that you're utilizing as data. And the renter experience survey was targeted to low income and very low income renters, as you know, and was redistributed at food banks and in-person listening sessions. An insignificant number of surveys were completed compared to the renter population. So this is not a scientific survey, not for just that reason, but it wasn't created in a very scientific way either. It was developed and distributed by the Biased Renter Protection Committee as well. So this is not something that we can rely on. You also have been receiving data from CEDA's call report, and this data may be representative of the types of calls coming into CEDA's hotline, which could be useful. However, the call volume is extremely low compared to the number of renters, and the only renters who call the hotline are those with problems, because that's when you need to call the hotline, is when you have a problem. So the issues reported are not representative of average renters. As far as the complaints we've heard from renters, we must document and verify complaints. We just can't hear complaint after complaint and not validate it if we want to use those complaints as a reason to consider policies. And just because the city has been working on these issues for a long time, like the other side keeps reminding us, that does not mean they should be moved forward with. Time is inconsequential. What matters most is unbiased research, valid data, and a fair exchange of ideas and solutions by all integrated parties. We should be careful and prudent when creating stringent laws against landlords, as their existence is.
Thank you, Catherine. Your time has concluded. Next is Tom Ryder, followed by Joanne Shatola. Tom, please unmute.
Good evening. My name is Tom Kreider. My city council representative is Mike Clark. I'm speaking to you today as a citizen who loves Eugene and the quality of life it offers. As a master recycler and a member of the Citizens for the Responsible Use of Plastics, I'm concerned about how the city handles the waste generated by its large events. Last year, it was the Olympic trials, as well as the University of Oregon athletic events. This year, in addition to the usual summer events that occur in Eugene, the World Athletics Championships are bringing 2,000 athletes from over 190 countries, as well as media personnel and spectators to our city. Given the lack of guidelines on the materials that athletes and spectators use and dispose of, these events have a large environmental impact on our city. It's my understanding that the Sustainability Commission has recommended 5 goals that the Eugene City Council should incorporate in developing a large events ordinance. First, incorporate common sense zero waste practices in order to reduce greenhouse gases. Second, achieve the Oregon state goal of 50% waste diversion. Third, alleviate pressure on our landfill. Fourth, educate the public while modeling waste reduction practices. And fifth, standardized waste reduction practices at local events. Presently, the state of California, as well as some other states, have enacted an events recycling law. I agree with the Sustainability Commission and am advocating that the Eugene City Council have a work session to develop a large events ordinance to support the environmental integrity that Eugene residents value and want to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next is Joanne Shatola, followed by Jacob True.
Mayor, Council, thank you. Joanne Shatola, Ward 5. My main home is in Ward 5, but I've owned a small condo in downtown Portland for 18 years. I'm currently faced with a decision to rent the Portland place or to sell it. It is not hard for me to make the decision I'm going to sell it. Why? Because the draconian tenant protections in Portland. I have rentals in Eugene, so it would not be hard for me to expand to the Portland market. Portland needs housing, and I have an 800 square foot space that would be an affordable unit. I will never be a Portland landlord. If the proposed tenant protections creeped into Eugene, this negative reaction would follow. Incentivize and attract the landlords. Do not repel the landlords. We provide the housing. Eugene should not want to follow in Portland's path. It's repulsive. Since Portland implemented its tenant protections, available housing has decreased by 28% in that city. This is not something we want in our community. The proposed tenant protections were sprung off the beginnings of Portland's path. There's insufficient and inaccurate data being presented. The population polled was not broad-based. The problems you are hearing from the tenant advocates are not the norm. Adding tenant protections is not a decision that must be made ASAP. There are plenty of free resources currently available for tenants. I feel we all need to take a step back. We need more time to make the best decision. Due to the lack of current and accurate market data, I propose council does not make any decisions regarding implementation of proposed tenant protections at this time. I think we are all caught up in the process of pushing forward and not taking the time necessary to make the best decision possible for our community. Let's take time for fair and balanced data to be obtained and properly analyzed. The pandemic has upset housing providers and tenants. There is still an eviction moratorium until September 30th, 2022. That's September 30th, 2022. Middle housing is up and coming. More regulations could scare off the smaller landlords, which would be contrary to the desired effect. Clearly, this is not an appropriate time to move forward with any of the proposed tenant protections. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Next is Jacob True, followed by Carolyn Partridge. Jacob, please unmute.
Hi, this is Steve. I'm standing in for Jacob True. I'm actually down here for my job in Portland on my 1 day off per week because I've been working up there trying to help folks get access to COVID vaccinations. I'm down here because my little brother is in a house where the landlord's unwilling to deal with a mold problem that is killing him, basically. And so I had to let him to stay in my house. And he's been trying to get into another place, but because of the awful way in which we apply for places, even though that he is a taxi driver that works something like 60 hours a week, he's going through a lot of problems with even trying to get into there. I've had to fight tooth and nail every single large property management company in this town to try to get mold problem solved. To try to basically to try to do every normal thing that you possibly could do. And like at the end of the day, the one thing that I think that you would need to consider as people who are on the council, I've lived here my entire life, and it's getting harder and harder and harder as a regular working class person to just survive and find a place. And like, if you don't think that it's reasonable if you're getting kicked out of your house in 30 days to make sure that you have a little bit of extra capital to try to get a spot, that's insane. There are a couple types of people in this world. They're the people that work and the people that don't. And to the landlords that I've met that support us, who are most of the working class landlords, the people that actually do work on their property, they understand what we're going through. Now, I don't think that, Jennings understands. I don't think that Bell understands. I don't think that any of these people whose job is to squeeze people and do nothing for the property understand what we're going through. I would ask you to join all of the tenants and the decent landlords who are actually responsible for and do work on their own properties and pass these reasonable pieces of legislation. It's not difficult. You just have to ask yourself which side you're on. And I hope that you're on ours, because it's getting real rough trying to take care of people out here when y'all decide not to. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next is Carolyn Partridge, followed by Robin Miller.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, councilors, mayor, and city manager. My name is Carolyn Partridge, and I live in Ward 2. Thank you for this forum. I hope you know that most Eugene residents appreciate all the hard work you do to solve our community's problems. We really do. Personally, I applaud the wisdom and foresight of the 2 motions that you passed to meet our carbon goals. By requiring new construction to be all electric, we are leapfrogging over gas and saving folks the cost of transitioning later. The second motion gives people a heads up that fossil fuels are being phased out and all appliances need to be electric by 2045. No one needs to give up their gas furnace or appliances now. They simply need to replace them when they need to replace them with electric when they wear out. A 23-year time span seems fair and gives people time to plan. I hope these proposals come to fruition. Seeing the handwriting on the wall, Northwest Gas is understandably running a PR campaign to preserve their business model. I find their arguments to be flimsy. For example, They say that customers deserve a choice. The choice to use a product that is causing climate mayhem. They say that gas provides heat when the power goes out. I speak from experience here. Electricity is still required for ignition and to operate the fan. They say that their pipes exceed standards. Even the toughest standards cannot stop all methane leaks or accidents. They tout renewable natural gas, yet as been said here in the past, it is simply not adequate for pipeline use unless mixed with frack gas. Even then, it still produces CO2. All these arguments are being given to protect against stranded assets. My fear is being stranded on a planet where life cannot survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next is Robin Miller, followed by Linda Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor Van and councilors. I'm Robin Miller with a single family here to express my concern and dismay over what leaps out to me as a lack of prudency concerning this tenant protection deliberation. After 5 years and countless hours of staff and council time, not to mention the considerable input from the affected public, this council is now being asked by tenant advocates and staff to believe that the presented implementation of the recommended PERT and displacement protections is the only viable solution available. And that without so much as a single trade study of viable options or analysis of the consequences. In my 28-year engineering career in aerospace, if there was no identification of viable alternatives, together with a rigorous trade study to support recommendations, you could count on serious reprimand and being priority directed to come back with the required information or find someone else who could. What other priority tools and strategies have been considered by the city in lieu of further restricting housing providers? What other methods of funding tenant displacement protections due to qualified terminations has been considered and analyzed? What other methods of providing education of tenant rights? Has the city examined the rental housing code database to monitor losses of single-family stock? If not, why not? I would think the city would want to know why 21 rental housing units have been lost in Ward 1 between fiscal year 19 and 20 reports. Are these canary warnings about excessive regulations? Anecdotal narratives aside, shouldn't the city insist on quantifiable data concerning so-called abusive evictions before falsely labeling landlords as the problem, let alone as the only problem?
Thank you, Robin. Your time has concluded. Next is Linda Kelly, followed by Ellen McKean.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Linda Kelly. I live in Ward 1, and I am a volunteer with 350 Eugene. As we are aware, the news is really disturbing. Some IPCC scientists are so frustrated with government inaction, they are considering striking. While we need to keep pushing countries to act, we can immediately take actions on a local level. The war in Ukraine highlights the perils of dependence on fossil fuels. The Afghanistan, Iraq, and Crimean wars have been waged with oil and gas as an underlying, if not always acknowledged reason. The control of pipeline routes, port access, and markets has been central. Russia supplies 40% oil, 60% natural gas used in Western Europe, and so holds power over that region for its energy. Until we create a system of energy that relies on in-country resources not able to be manipulated by global markets, we will continue to see more war and increasing prices for heating and transport. Our local electrical energy is very clean and can continue to expand as baseload options like geothermal energy, abundant in Eastern Oregon, river-based heat pumps, and wave energy emerge and receive more federal support. There's a lot of misinformation and pushback from the gas industry right now. We must resist falling prey to their short-term interests and scare tactics. They're inaccurate and they're toxic to us. I request you vote to advance a proposed electrification ordinance on April 13th and advance it to a public hearing that would make all new construction electric. If carve-outs are needed to be made for specific industrial or restaurant use, then those can be considered on a case-by-case basis with a high bar for proving necessity. Riverfront property should be all electric. Other localities have worked with pipe fitter unions to require gray water systems to ensure continued job opportunities for that trade. Passing electrification ordinances as soon as possible is crucial. Northwest Natural will take every advantage it has to expand its service as we delay. Thank you all for your important work on City Council. I really appreciate it. I know it's difficult. Let's keep moving forward together. The future can be brighter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. Next is Ellen McKean, followed by Mariah Stendel.
Hi, Councilors, Mayor Venice. My name is Ellen McCain, and I'm a renter in Ward 8, and I've been a renter in Eugene for nearly 10 years. I'm a law student at U of O, and I also serve on the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association's Board of Directors. And I'm here today to urge the City Council to adopt the entire slate of renter protections, including displacement prevention assistance. I'd like to share some of my own experiences with housing instability in Eugene. After I graduated from U of O, I couch surfed for over a month while apartment hunting. When I was finally approved for an apartment, the landlord told me and my roommates we would have to pay a much higher security deposit than was stated in the ad because we fell below the income minimum. 6 months into that lease, my boyfriend was no cause evicted from his home, and he moved in with us because moving costs were simply too high. He had not had enough time to save for his next security deposit. In fact, in the span of 2 years, I had 3 separate friends crash on my couch during their apartment hunts, one of which lasted 4 months. It takes time, energy, and a lot of money to apartment hunt, especially in Eugene's market. My friend worked more than one part-time retail job, and she was repeatedly rejected because of her income, and she sank hundreds into application fees. I share this just to illustrate how housing instability is a real burden, both financially and emotionally. Lengthy apartment hunts, multiple application fees, and prohibitive deposits make housing in Eugene hard to access. And even once renters have secured housing, many are forced to start the cycle over due to no-cause evictions. These reforms are about equity and access. Regulating application fees, screening standards, and getting financial support to displaced renters would protect tenants and enable working-class residents to experience stability and upward mobility. Please pass the slate of renter protections, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ellen. Next is Mariah Stendel, followed by Mahindra Mohan Kumar.
Mayor Venice and City Council, thank you so much for this opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Mariah Stendel. I'm a resident in Ward 3. I'm also a doctoral student in clinical psychology and a therapist working with children and youth in Eugene. And through my work as a therapist, I've witnessed the alarming effects of the climate crisis on the mental health of children and youth, including working directly with youth who are experiencing trauma and displacement from wildfires. Children have shared with me their feelings of helplessness and grief around the climate crisis, and often report feeling really betrayed by adults in this regard. And this compels me to speak tonight to encourage the city to reaffirm its dedication to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I'd first like to thank you for your vote to forward the 2 motions on transitioning our community to clean electricity last fall. It is so exciting to see Eugene lead the way in these initiatives in the necessary shift to carbon-free cities. And it's just really critical that we maintain this momentum towards a fossil-free Eugene in order to mitigate the worst impacts of the climate crisis, which we know is disproportionately affecting communities who have been marginalized, low-income communities, and children and youth who I hear from daily. Now is the time for the city of Eugene to pass concrete policy to decarbonize our buildings And tonight I'm requesting that you forward ordinance language in a public hearing at the upcoming April 13th work session on this issue. Thank you so much for your consideration, and I cede my time.
Thank you, Mariah. Next is Mahindra Mohan Kumar, followed by Scott Smith. Mahindra, I'm sorry, but we actually cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that.
No problem. Go ahead and start over.
Okay, what's going on, Eugene City Council? My name is Mahindra. I'm a grad student here. I work on housing and houselessness related issues, but prior to being a graduate student, I actually worked as case manager in houseless services. So if I need to remind everyone, we've had the highest per capita houselessness rate in Eugene in 2019, above many other cities that we would associate with chronic visible houselessness, above Los Angeles. We're #1 in the country. These protections are a drop in the bucket. As we approach things like this looming climate change, further and further amounts of people will become houseless here in Eugene. And so everyone else has given really good reasons, right? I'm gonna keep it real with y'all. You're gonna be spending way more money on the city end if these things aren't adopted. I'll give you another anecdote. There's been a lot of recruitment for graduate students here at UO. I find myself in every recruitment keeping it super real. Hey, if you don't have money, do not come here. The amount that you will be paid will not be commensurate with the rent that you will be asked to pay. Okay? So that's another thing. Unfortunately, while I support these policies, they're very, very minimal to what's actually going to be needed to prevent these further episodes of crisis. So I asked the City Council to at least adopt these. And that's all.
Thank you, Mahindra. Next is Scott Smith, followed by Lynn Woodrich. Scott, please unmute.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Smith. I'm from Ward 5. Mayor Vinnis and City Council, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm speaking in opposition to the idea of the City of Eugene having its own housing rules for rental housing. One specific item in the whole list of proposed changes regards security deposits. And I encourage you to allow flexibility in security deposits like we have now, because allowing housing providers to offer to rent to people with a higher security deposit actually leads to more approved applications for rentals, as opposed to just housing providers denying an application because applicants did not meet their screening criteria. So it's kind of a misunderstood item that really one has to look into to really understand how security deposits really work. I mean, there's real risk for landlords. I mean, when things can go bad at the end of the tenancy, bills can easily exceed $5,000, and even up from that when you take a couple months rent that may be owing, and floor coverings and damage from animals frequently. So these are real costs that have to be paid. And we all know from the news, the inflation that's happening, the cost for repairs and materials are skyrocketing. So I really encourage you to please do not put a cap on security deposits. As a reminder, the existing City of Eugene rental housing program mirrors the state rules. There is not currently Eugene special rules. There is just the rental housing program that aids in enforcement of Oregon state rules. Why should Eugene be different than Springfield regarding housing rules? I don't think there's any compelling reason why Eugene should be different than Springfield. Let's keep landlord-tenant laws at the state level. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Scott. Next is Lynn Woodridge, followed by Dylan Plummer.
My name's Lynn Woodridge. I'm the Active Bethel Community Co-Chair living in Ward 6 with my 93-year-old dad, and I'm a homeowner in the Bethel portion of Ward 8. I want to thank you for budgeting in the tree planting along Highway 99. I, Friends of Trees, and ABC members helped city staff plant the first 49 trees on Sunday and will help again on April 10th to finish the 132 tree planting. Many of the trees are large and beautiful and are already making a difference in the look of Highway 99. We will also be planting trees again with Friends of Trees on March 26th from 9 a.m. to noon in the Mangan Park area. All are welcome to attend. I also thank you for scheduling a work session for the Health Overlay Zone and risk bonds. With the shutdown of J.H. Baxter, it has become even more clear that the city needs the Health Overlay Zone and new tools to deal with chronic toxic polluters, ensure polluters have insurance to cover the cost of cleanup when they shut down, and stop new polluters from locating here. These tools will be a critical piece in future planning for our area. I just received a letter from a Bethel resident who opposes the middle housing changes. I will read you a portion. We hear that Eugene's tree canopy is insufficient for optimizing shade and water retention over our land area, and the canopy is decreasing each year with increased land development. The majority of our Bethel neighbors do not have air conditioning, nor do they have substantial insulation from heat or cold. We depend on our shade to survive heat events. With the city's proposed middle housing plan, usable lot space is so dense that there's not room to accommodate parking. Parking will continue to fill front yards where we again will not be able to increase the neighborhood tree canopy and relieve residents' heat suffering from lack of shade and air movement. If cars and trucks do not fill front yards, car parking will be strung along the street. In at least one middle housing meeting, a resident called attention to this issue. The middle housing team could suggest no remedy. In summary, Eugene's current middle housing plan is not a plan for a world experiencing frightening climate change. Neither is it a livable plan for low-income neighborhoods. Please urge the city to take this back to the drawing board. I'm hoping you understand the urgency and know that Bethel has been neglected for 40 years. And we need to have a voice in the future of Bethel. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next is Dylan Plummer, followed by Kyle Trefny.
Mayor Vinnis and City Council, thank you for this opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Dylan Plummer, and I'm a renter in Ward 3. I'm also the senior campaign representative working on building electrification in Oregon and Washington with the Sierra Club. I'm here on behalf of thousands of Sierra Club members in Eugene to thank the council for their efforts to forward building electrification in our city. As council will revisit the motions passed last fall at their upcoming April 13th work session, I want to strongly encourage council to forward the draft ordinance language that staff will be presenting to a public hearing and to continue pushing for this exciting climate policy. I also want to bring to your attention the rate case that Northwest Natural is currently engaged with at the Public Utility Commission, advocating for an 11% rate increase on top of the 10% rate increase from last fall. The corporation is demanding that ratepayers subsidize expanding fossil fuel infrastructure and providing bonuses for fossil fuel executives. All the while, Oregonians are suffering with inflation and many other economic challenges. If this rate increase goes through, it will mean that working class Eugene residents will be paying rates over 1/4 higher than those from last October. And while the Sierra Club is actively intervening to oppose this rate increase, it must be noted that as gas prices continue to rise, electrification becomes increasingly beneficial not only for our climate and our climate resilience, but also for our pocketbooks. I also wanted to mention recent updates at the state level. 2 bills of note passed during the 22 short session in regards to our efforts on electrification, setting the stage for more aggressive efforts to electrify building stock in the 2023 session. First, I want to highlight the passage of the emergency heat relief bills, which will provide subsidies for homeowners and landlords to purchase and install highly efficient and electric heat pumps, which provide both mechanical heating and cooling. Heat pumps are increasingly a critical resource that our communities have in the face of extreme heat driven by the climate crisis. And of course, electrification will not only to help reduce our emissions, but it will also increase our resilience in the face of the impacts that we're already experiencing here in Eugene. Second, I wanted to note the passage of legislation to create the Resilient Efficient Buildings Task Force. And while sadly reach code legislation failed, this task force does show increasing interest at the state level to pursue aggressive measures for building electrification. And I want to just highlight this because our efforts here in Eugene have set the tone for these conversations on electrification in Salem thus far. And I really hope that you all will continue to lead the way and vote to forward ordinance language to public comment next month. Finally, I want to voice the Sierra Club's strong support for the displacement prevention assistance policy being considered by the city.
Thank you, Dylan. Your time has concluded. Next is Kyle Trefny, followed by Kevin Cronin.
Mayor Venice, City Council and City Manager, can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Kyle Trefny. I'm a student, a wildland firefighter, and a resident in Ward 1. This testimony also regards our city infrastructure electrifying. Thank you for your vote forwarding the 2 motions on transitioning our community to clean electricity last fall. And I really want to urge you that we need to go further. My great-grandmother lived in Eugene. My parents went to school here. My great-aunt lives in this area. And especially my great-aunt, who's in her 70s, struggles with heat waves. As she gets older and projections get worse due to emissions, I'm really not sure how many more she can take, and that worries me immensely. I also want to speak to my experience firefighting. I was on a Eugene wildfire crew. Because of fossil fuels and warming, the land is extremely dry and our resources are stretched. As fire moves so fast across the landscape, we were in a position where on the hill where we had no advance warning about a crown fire coming. So our crew from Eugene was actually stuck on this hill. Luckily, we had a good safety zone, but no matter what we do on the fire line, we need to get off fossil fuels in those landscapes. Otherwise, they will become increasingly dangerous. Eugene needs a ban on new gas hookups, retrofitting existing buildings for full electrification. And I hope that there's an emphasis on low-income, BIPOC, and historically marginalized communities, including seniors like my great-aunt, and the transition off of fossil fuels. I'm excited about the council moving forward with a work session on regulation to reduce GHG emissions, and it is critical that we move forward with a ban on new fossil fuel infrastructure before entering into a new agreement with Northwest Natural, especially as I understand one with a termination clause such as the one currently included in their negotiations. I know now is the best time for Eugene to pass a concrete policy to decarbonize our buildings. It's already late, but no better time will come. I request City Council members vote to move ordinance language to a public hearing regarding the mandate for all electric new construction at your upcoming April 13th work session. Please take this to heart. Banning all new fossil fuel infrastructure, sorry about lights turning off, I'm at school, is such an important thing for the council to accomplish, both for firefighters, young and old generations, marginalized groups, and more. And the reason I'm at school is because I'm studying for finals, but I wanted to take this time to say this to all of you. So please move it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kyle. Next is Kevin Cronin, followed by Tim Morris.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Kevin Cronin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm here today to ask the City Council to adopt the full slate of renter protections in both phase 1, 2, and 3 that are being proposed to you on Wednesday. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time to talk about application fees. In my previous work, application fees have represented a huge barrier to families that are trying to exit homelessness. After reading your Wednesday agenda packet, I was dismayed to see the application reform delegated to a phase 3. There's no mention of implementing a cap on application fees, which would serve and be nearly as effective as banning application fees entirely. I have a video on YouTube where I complete a landlord screening criteria in under 10 minutes for less than $10. I am happy to partner with the city to create a similar video and help landlords utilize the existing tools that they have to reduce their screening costs so that working class people can access housing. President Obama spoke to the fierce urgency of now. We can't wait for a phase 3. We've been talking about this issue since December 2016. It is time We are not reinventing the wheel with these reforms. These reforms are tried and true. And in displacement prevention assistance's case, it was upheld by the Oregon Supreme Court in November 2021. Nearly 100 people have been no cause evicted since that court ruling, and we need to move forward with alacrity in implementing displacement prevention assistance. Thank you so much and have a good night.
Thank you, Kevin. Next is Tim Morris, followed by Sandra Shotridge.
Hi, quick microphone check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and City Manager. For the record, my name is Timothy Morris. I live in Ward 1, and I am a member of the Renters Protection Committee. I'm here today to share my full support of these renter protections. COVID-19 has highlighted many of the disparities that renters have been facing for decades. Poor habitability issues, improper landlord practices, and an economic system that helps keep poor people poor. 33% of our community are severely rent burdened, which means that they're spending more than 50% of their entire income on rent and rent alone. And our rental vacancy rate is 1.6%, whereas your average city is somewhere between 5 to 8%. What this means is that it's so difficult to find available housing, and even if a tenant gets lucky, it's even more difficult to afford it. Our city has been talking about these renter protections for far too long. At another city council meetings, Councilor Zelenka has highlighted that he found an email from 6 years ago talking about these renter protections. Our Housing and Policy Board and Renters Protection Committee, who are your trusted issues on housing and renter issues, have spent countless hours in meetings discussing and working through these protections. It's time to take action. Staff will be presenting a phased approach to passing these protections, and I understand that there are some decimal point details that need to be worked through to finalize these protections, but it cannot be delayed any further. It's too important as we enter an endemic stage to not allow the old normal to occur, as the old normal has not served the city of Eugene. Tenants in our community are crying out for transparency and for support, and I encourage you to listen to the significant data submitted by the 2019 survey from Portland State University and from the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association, which have highlighted the difficulty of simply living day to day here in the city of Eugene. I would also encourage you and caution from listening to the perspective of those who directly and financially benefit from a lack of transparency and information to tenants. Please support these protections and implement all phases of these renter protections as quickly as you can. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Timothy. Next is Sandra Shotridge, followed by Isabella Clark. Sandra, please unmute. So Sandra is not connecting, so I'm gonna skip Sandra. Isabella Clark is no longer on the meeting, so next will be Jane Coverdall. And Sandra, I will come back to you. Jane, please unmute.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you. Go ahead and start when you're ready.
Okay, hello, Eugene Council. My name is Jane. I live in Ward 5, I believe. And I'm here to urge you to pass the full slate of tenant protections and displacement prevention assistance. Technically, we're in the 7th year of a housing crisis. I do want to acknowledge that I'm here as a displaced Alaska Native on stolen land. For Natives, this housing crisis has been going on for hundreds of years, not 7. I do appreciate everything I've heard about the land acknowledgement, and there's a lot of material that is intersectional, just naturally so. I'm sorry, I get nervous and shaky when I talk publicly. Everyone acknowledging the importance of the safety of our trans relatives. That's really important. and the environment. These are naturally intersectional. I would like to see more representation that is purposely so for Natives on our occupied lands. We are far more likely to experience displacement and homelessness on our own lands, and it carries mental health issues and emotional issues that are a bit unique, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. Also, on a personal level, I think it's important to pass these. I was in a car accident that led to me having horrible credit. In response to it, I did go back to school. While I was at school, I was also caregiving for a loved one. I was forced to move back in with family. I couldn't walk. I have very little rental history that would be recognized due to paying my rent to family. This has made it incredibly difficult and scary to try and find housing at this time. Some of the only rental history I have is bad, not because, at least I personally don't believe I deserve it. I remember being given a walkthrough while leaving my apartments and ending the lease. I was complimented and thanked. I was told that it was the best they'd ever seen anyone leave it and that it was in perfect condition. But then they took my entire deposit, and that wasn't enough for them. They wanted even more than that. And it was in their own paperwork that what they were doing was illegal, but I can't afford a lawyer. And I know this is really common. I saw a lot of people.
Thank you, Jane. Your time has concluded. Next is Sandra Shotridge, followed by phone ending in 327. Sandra, please unmute. Okay, Sandra, I'll try to come back to you again. Next is phone ending in 327, followed by David Salus.
Hi, this is William Smith from Ward 1. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. I'm here to talk about wireless safety and broadband infrastructure, especially fiber optic infrastructure. And first, I'd like to thank Councilor Semple, Council President Surratt, and Mayor Vinnis for the positive feedback following the public testimony last month on ways that cities are working to bring safe and affordable fiber optic connections to more and more citizens. In that testimony, I promised to address the question, would fiber optic connections really be worth it to voters if they really knew what's possible with these connections? And I put this question to many people in the past month, and the answer has consistently been yes, when they realize that each fiber optic connection holds virtually unlimited bandwidth, safely and affordably. This is because each fiber optic connection is made of fiberglass that holds the full spectrum of bandwidth, similar to a glass prism holding the full spectrum of visible light. The only real limit to bandwidth capacity of each fiber optic connection comes from the technologies that are currently attached to it. And those technologies are rapidly evolving in the cities that are committed to fiber optic connections for all. In Chattanooga, for example, population 180,000, the wide use of fiber optic connections has fueled demand for improved fiber optic technologies, thereby attracting startup companies to innovate those technologies, which has been creating jobs and expanded economic development. As a result of this dynamic, people visiting Chattanooga are often stunned when they actually experience the interactive tech revolution that has become a reality there, in not only in tech, but also in education, telemedicine, world-class gaming, and other fields and industries. And it's happening in other cities that Harvard law professor Susan Crawford details in her book, Fiber. And so, yes, for a growing number of us, safe and affordable fiber optic connections are really worth it. And not only do we vote, but we also talk with friends and loved ones, and many of them vote too. Thank you.
Thank you, William. So it looks like we have Sandra Shotridge and Isabella Clark back on the meeting. So I apologize, David, you will go after them. So next is going to be Sandra Shotridge, followed by Isabella Clark.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Sandra Shotridge. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I am Native American, and I'm pushing up against a wall. I was anyway. It took forever finding a place to rent. And my concern is, as a woman of color and bordering on the missing and murdered Indigenous woman, it was really scary. I didn't have kids with me. If I had, I don't know what I would have done. Being a woman of color, trying to find a place to rent when you're dealing with domestic violence is extremely difficult and scary. I also had COVID. I'm still recovering. I have a hard time talking. But at least I have a place to stay. But I worry about women of color, including my trans sisters. I worry about women struggling and turn around and have to pay such a huge amount for rent, let alone application fees. I'm sorry, I forgot to add that I'm in Ward 8. But anyway, putting a cap on application fees for starters would be a huge help. You have a lot of marginalized people trying to find a place to rent. And I'm telling you.
Thank you, Sandra. Your time has concluded. Next is Isabella Clark, followed by David Salus.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I live in Ward 3, and I am here tonight to urge you to pass the full slate of tenant protections and displacement prevention assistance. I am a graduate student at the University of Oregon, and I know graduate students who have had to live in their offices because they were unable to find affordable housing in this town. And while the proposed tenant protections do not by any means fully solve the affordable housing crisis in Eugene, I think that this legislation can be a step in the right direction and in the direction of prioritizing the people of Eugene over profits in Eugene. And I would urge you to listen to the testimony of those here tonight who have talked to you of their housing challenges and to believe them and to listen to their voices over those of the landlords who are worried about losing money on application fees and security deposits when they are already making money off of their tenants. I would urge you to think about the working class residents of Eugene who do not have hundreds of dollars to spend on application fees and then turn around and have thousands of dollars to put down on a security deposit. So yeah, please, I urge you to really do this thing for the people of Eugene and to actually show up and show them that you care about them and that you believe them and that you're listening to them. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Isabella. Next is David Salus, followed by R. Locke.
Good evening. This is David Solis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I've just got a couple of quick points. I look back at your minutes too, and what I see is a history from about 2012 to 2018 of landlords in the city and renters working together on affordable housing issues. And the Eugene Renters Union makes an appearance in the minutes late in 2018, and after that, things seem to diverge. And we've moved away from collectively trying to work on affordable housing issues. And now it's this renter protection thing, which in my opinion, sort of falsely divides us. The landlords need Eugene to be healthy. We can't just pick up our properties and move like a renter can when he or she is unhappy or finds a job in Texas. Mayor and Councilor Yee, I want to focus on a minute on data. Mayor, you talked about homelessness in your State of the City speech here a bit ago, and you talked a lot about data and making sure that we were doing the right thing the right way. And Councilor Yee, you are apparently a member of the Comp Plan Technical Advisory Committee, and I watched their December meeting where they agonized for 2.5 hours over data and whether what they were doing was really right, whether it's really measurable, whether it's the right data, whether they have the right metric, how they're going to measure effectiveness and efficiency of what they do. And about 45 minutes of that was focused on housing issues and rental housing issues at that. So I would urge that rather than just take this anecdotal stuff that we've been calling data, which isn't in a scientific sense, neither the renter protection, that renter experience survey, which by the way, the city is on the record as saying it is not scientific. It was not meant to be scientific. It is not representative, and it was not meant to be representative. So why we're still hanging our hats on 6-year-old information that's not data, not objective, is a mystery to me. Your housing tools and strategies report also indicates that renter protections have been shown long-term to actually decrease the amount of affordable housing. So I think what we really have is a financial problem. The Oregon Economic Development Department just reported in January that there are 10 job vacancies for every 6 unemployed in Eugene. So I would suggest we look at focusing on getting those people those open jobs. Lastly, I'd like to use the city economist, not your own housing staff, for the feasibility analysis about whether these things.
Thank you, David. Your time has concluded. Next is R. Locke, followed by Jen Korn. R. Locke, please state your full name and ward if known. R. Locke, please unmute.
Sorry about that. Richard Locke, Ward 8. Mayor, Council, I personally have a lot of skin in the game that we find ourselves in, along with about 180 other businesses in our group that we now call Eugene Business Alliance. It's a cat and mouse game with a vast number of homeless individuals that torment us because Eugene's weak public policies that favor them over us. Together, we are a bunch of disrespected businesses that you folks are holding the safety of our businesses, our employees, our properties, our residential neighborhoods at arm's length. It seems our city officials only care about treating the folks that are our unjust nemesis with greater respect than the just citizens. It is the lawless unhoused that prey on our property, create unsafe zones throughout the city, leave untold amount of garbage everywhere. They are in every public space doing what they do best, exercising access to excess. Your leadership or lack of it has made it almost impossible to protect law-abiding citizens over the unhoused individuals mentioned before. We have worked very hard to support and supply safety to our impoverished, unsheltered folks in West Eugene. You all know that they are the most victimized population in Eugene by the unjust population of homeless community that you folks call inventory. Unlike you all, we have befriended many of these folks and have listened to their stories, have felt their pain, shook their hands, and provided safe places for them to stay. We believe in the just needy and loathe the unjust criminals. Let's separate the chaff of the wheat from the chaff. We only are asking for our safety, nothing else, housed or not. There's no reason that for any business to open its doors and view uncontrolled homelessness and unsolicited homelessness. There is no reason for our just impoverished to be victimized by unjust campers living next door. Keep pushing, I'm gonna be. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next is Jen Korn, followed by Aya Cochran. And just as a reminder, if the meeting host lowers your hand, that means you will not have an opportunity to speak tonight. Jen, please unmute.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Korn. I'm a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker Professional Group, and I live in Ward 1. I'm here to ask you to pass displacement prevention assistance to protect renters like me. In December of 2020, my family rented a home from a local property management company in Eugene. We only needed the rental for about 1 year while we prepared to purchase a home. We signed a 7-month lease with an optional month-to-month agreement after the initial lease with occupancy starting in December. At the beginning of June, they sent us the month-to-month lease agreement. We filled it out and sent it back. I assumed that would be it, so I didn't think about saving money for a new rental deposit. On July 7th, we received a 30-day no-cause eviction that stated that we had to vacate by August 3rd. The 5th of July holiday delayed us receiving the notice because we paid our rent in full and on time every month. We were not protected the same as people who could not pay their rent. We had just been approved for a sizable home loan and we're in the process of searching for the right home to fit all of our needs. So I asked them if we could have 60 to 90 days. I also reminded them that I have disabled children and health issues, so moving in less than 30 days was going to be impossible. They refused, and it turns out that they had already advertised the home for rent online for $200 more per month, thereby displacing an entire family just to profit off of other people who were given a no-cause eviction. And displaced at the end of the moratorium. We're unable to find a new rental as we were and still are in a major housing crisis. We had to take from certain funds in order to purchase a camper that we then parked in the driveway of a friend's house out in Crow and lived in for the next 3.5 months. There isn't a whole lot of room in a 26-foot camper when you have 6 people and a large dog. So while we looked for a home to buy, the kids would stay with friends most of the time. Eventually, we found a home that would suit most of our needs, but those 3.5 months were among some of the most stressful and, for lack of a better word, traumatizing times for our family. If the displacement prevention assistance were in place, I do believe that no-cause evictions would become less prevalent, as it would simply become uneconomical for the landlord, or it would at least make them stop and think about the people involved and not just the numbers. I'm here to ask you to pass displacement prevention assistance to protect families like mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next is Aya Cochran, followed by phone ending in 205.
Hello, Mayor Venice, City Councilors, and City Manager Mandry. Thank you for your time, the opportunity to speak, and the work that you do for our city. My name is Aya Cochran, and I live in Ward 1. I was, until very recently, the program coordinator at the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, and I am excited and honored to be starting as the new coalition coordinator for the Fossil Free Eugene campaign. I really look forward to speaking with you and working with you in the future for a just transition away from fossil fuels in that capacity. But this evening, I'm coming to you as a concerned citizen and mother. I was born and raised in Eugene, and when I left to pursue my education, I realized just what an amazing city this is. So I decided to move back here to start my family because I know Eugene as a strong, welcoming community that has a long history of leading on sustainability and climate issues. We have an opportunity, again, to lead this state and take a stand for a livable climate future. You showed your leadership on climate issues when you voted to move forward 2 motions transitioning our community to clean electricity last fall. This important step must be followed with strong ordinance to mandate electrification and decarbonize our buildings as quickly as possible. I had my daughter shortly after the 2020 wildfires that surrounded us in smoke, devastated the homes of many. I remember driving to my final midwife appointment where the visibility was so bad that I could not see traffic lights in front of me, and the sky was red. I was terrified and horrified that this was the world I was bringing new life into. The time to mandate building electrification is now. We cannot allow the fossil fuel industry to delay concrete action. The scientific evidence shows the harms of fracked gas, from extraction to transportation to the use of gas appliances in the home. Homes and buildings consume nearly 43% of all energy in Oregon, causing about 1/3 of the state's climate pollution, making it the second highest source of climate pollution. The climate crisis disproportionately affects BIPOC, low-income, and other marginalized people, including children. Transitioning off fossil fuels to renewable energy is a concrete way we can take action now and move forward for a just and livable future for our community and for the future generations. I urge the City Council to vote to move ordinance language to a public hearing regarding the mandate for all electric new construction at your upcoming April 13th work session. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Aya. Next is phone ending in 205, followed by Tara Garkow. Phone ending in 205, please state your full name and ward if known.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Cindy Allen, Eugene. Eugene is a city in many ways similar to Boulder, especially politically. Yet Boulder is less than 1% growth and Colorado is slow growth. In 2019, the Oregon legislature voted to be the first to take away R1 zoning. It was voted down in regular session but passed in a special Sunday vote. The online information is that proponents were hoping for duplexes in the neighborhoods, but somehow got more. Eugene's version is many times that. At the end of 2019, the first cases of COVID were reported. It has been petitioned and seconded that the city ask for a 1-year extension on HB 2001 because of COVID. While we have been in lockdown for 2 years, with meetings on Zoom, our city has dramatically changed. High rises and stack impacts, RFK Jr.'s terminology, everywhere. And now unaware neighbors are on the chopping block for this type of expansion. We well remember the organic farmers of Seavey Loop and how they stood off big development. Billionaires such as Bill Gates have been buying up farmland, but it will be big farms and not the organic farms. And now we're facing housing. Many are questioning, why has BlackRock only funded in 1989 and owned primarily by the wealthiest of the wealthy, the less than 0.5%, been allowed to acquire a monopoly on housing, increasing the cost of all housing worldwide, far beyond wages and savings. It's well documented that BlackRock often pays far more than market value. Common YouTube videos, BlackRock is also heavily invested in federally subsidized housing that the taxpayer pays, these unbalanced rent. Common internet YouTubes, BlackRock, the company that owns the world. BlackRock wants to be your landlord. BlackRock, you will own nothing and you will love it. The Klaus Schwab infamous comment. We do have surety bonds. Online, people are discussing how they are using these in a variety of issues to ensure that their rights are protected.
Thank you, Cindy. Your time has concluded. Next is Tara Garkow, followed by our last speaker, Eme Okoti Oyeken.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hello, Mayor Venice, City Council, and staff. My name is Tara Garkow, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a renter in Councilor Surratt's Ward 7, a current member of Ask Me Local 3267. I serve on the board of directors at CEDA, and for the last 3 years, I've worked for the Lane County Housing Authority, providing case management to families on Section 8. Before that, I worked at a local mental health organization as a housing navigator, helping folks find housing. And if you've never attended a local housing navigator meeting, I implore you to do so. I know you're considering several renter protections today, and I urge you to take serious action and pass the displacement prevention assistance to protect renters like myself and my clients. In all my years helping folks find and maintain housing, I've seen countless rental applications denied for low credit and insufficient funds to pay for security deposits, among other things that I'll save for another day. In the last few months, several families on my caseload have received no-cause evictions, and I've witnessed the severe impact that they've had on low-income individuals and families in a market like ours, where affordable housing options are scarce, and a single no-cause eviction is a precursor for homelessness. And I'm not exaggerating. If you've done a recent rental housing search, you know the market now is cutthroat more than ever before, and many landlords and property management companies are charging unnecessarily exorbitant application fees and double security deposits to weed out applicants. Most of the families I serve don't have $5,000 to put towards a double security deposit on top of application fees and rent, especially when the eviction serving landlord has a full month to refund what's left of their previous deposit. And as I mentioned before to y'all, I want to point out that a person working a full-time job earning the local minimum wage at $12.75 an hour earns a little over $2,000 gross a month, which doesn't come close to meeting the income eligibility criteria for a one-bedroom. Let's say a one-bedroom anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month. And that's what most rental property management companies list on their rental criteria. So for these reasons, I strongly urge you to pass these renter protections, just like cities have, like Portland have since 2007. Thank you, or 2017, sorry. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tara. And our last speaker is M.A. Okoti Oyekin.
Thank you, Mayor Venice and City Council. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony this evening. My name is M.A. Okoti Oyekin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an environmental and climate justice advocate supporting the Fossil Free Eugene Coalition. I live in the city of Eugene, Ward 3. And thank you for giving space at your upcoming April 13th work session for a discussion about how to move forward with the equitable transition off of fossil fuel use in buildings. As you may have read in the latest IPCC report, human-induced climate change is causing dangerous and widespread disruption in nature and affecting the lives of billions of people around the world, despite efforts to reduce the risks. People and ecosystems least able to cope are being hit hardest. As a marginalized individual myself on the front lines of not just the crisis of climate, but the crisis of anti-Black racism afflicting our communities, I can tell you few things hurt me more than to experience those who charge themselves with being my protectors, fellow community members, and allies advocate for delay and the continuation of that which is bringing me harm. I'm incredibly blessed to still be here to tell you to move forward a vote to stop fossil fuel infrastructure expansion at the April 13th work session, because my dead contemporaries and victims of overlapping environmental and racial injustice very well cannot communicate the same sense of urgency. I emphasize that the electrification roadmap has to be tied to increasing the supply and affordability of housing. Some tools to consider are developer energy efficiency tax credits, expedited review and permitting, and density bonuses for energy efficiency, particularly for the development of alternative housing models like cooperatives and land trusts. We should also consider what overlap exists with the House Bill 2001 and 2003 implementation and the new local renter protections, and how to leverage the work happening in those spaces to achieve equitable electrification and affordable housing goals. Thank you for the time to give testimony this evening, and I look forward to you taking bold action to address the intersecting crises of environmental, class, and racial inequity at your April 13th electrification work session. Thank you.
Thank you, M.A. And Mayor, that concludes the public forum for this evening.
Thank you very much for moderating that, Naya, and thank you. That was a very there was a lot of moving testimony tonight. So much of the testimony of renters and the experiences they have and the vulnerability they feel is profound. And May, I actually very much appreciate your wrapping it all together, the intersections of all of those issues. So thank you very much for that. You were the perfect concluding testimony for the evening. All right, we have counselors lined up, Counselor Keating and then Counselor Siret.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said. I concur with your assessment.
Lightning round, quickly. Thank you, Kyle Trefny, for fighting wildfires, and good luck on your finals. Thank you to Ward 2 residents, Carolyn Partridge and Dylan Plummer, as well as Linda and Mariah, and those who spoke to the perils of our global addiction to fossil fuels. I thank you for your cogent comments regarding the need for decarbonization and building electrification in advance of our April 13th work session, and reducing our addiction, as I said, or reining in the fossil fuel industry and reducing our addiction to fossil fuels. Housing. I actually heard, well, first of all, let me frame it this way, Mayor. There are great housing providers in our community. Homes for Good, Shelter Care, St. Vincent de Paul, Cornerstone Community Housing, Opportunity Village. Thank you for being housing providers. I heard a so-called housing provider tonight say that the displacement assistant program, the reforms that are in front of us are, quote, repulsive. What is repulsive is making a parallel to stealing a catalytic converter. While there are various barriers and pitfalls regarding tenants collecting their security deposits, one's rental deposit, making a parallel to securing that rental deposit to stealing a catalytic converter, is insulting not only to the 53% of the community that are renters, it's insulting to the nearly 1% of landlords who are responsible landlords. It's insulting to everyone on this call. It's insulting to the public process. I long for equitable ways for tenants to secure their rental deposits, and to draw some parallel that those tenants are somehow stealing is repulsive, it's inappropriate, and it's grossly unacceptable. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Syret and then Councillor Ye.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Keating, for your impassioned response. I want to thank everyone who came to speak. A lot of thoughts around the tenant protections, but I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the testimony about House Bill 2001, specifically from our good friend Lynn Woodrich from Bethel. So I found Lynn's testimony a little self-contradictory. She began by thanking us for the tree planting along Highway 99 and the extra money that we helped to get there, and I will take some credit for that, and for prioritizing that tree planting, but then spoke in opposition to the middle housing code. So besides the tree planting along Highway 99, the City of Eugene, in conjunction with Friends of Trees, is planting, and one of the plantings she mentioned is planting trees in people's yards and their right-of-ways, countering the idea that the city is somehow determined to reduce the tree canopy in Bethel. We are actively working to increase the tree canopy in Bethel right now, today, this month. The middle housing is exactly a plan to address climate change. That's not necessarily why it was created, but that is one of the unintended consequences. By requiring us to build more housing more densely, we are going to forestall sprawling out into our farmlands, our forests, our wetlands, which would increase the use of fossil fuels and increase our carbon output tremendously. So, and our code includes protections for trees and requirements for how trees are handled. And the middle housing code doesn't change that, which is why you don't see it in the code being discussed right now. So there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about what this code will and will not do. And I encourage people to recognize that there are many things in our code and our work on housing that is not part of complying with House Bill 2001. So you won't see it in the code. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I would encourage you to look at our housing implementation pipeline work to see where we are working on affordability and other things that people have brought up around House Bill 2001, and to look at city staff's work on this proposed code and get the details so that you understand better what we are actually talking about instead of what people are trying to make you think we are talking about.
Thank you. Councillor Ye.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So first, I will say I have lived in a number of communities in Oregon, and I have never lived anywhere who loved trees more than Eugene. We are crazy about trees, and I enjoy talking about them so often. And I want to thank Claire for pointing out how many trees we are planting in Bethel, because it is super exciting actually to have our urban forest be expanding, especially in that area. That's great. So I actually wanted to thank Jane, and I'm probably going to pronounce your last name wrong, but Coverdell, for your comment about how important it is to have diverse bodies making decisions and giving feedback in our community. And so I will point out that our boards and commission recruitment is open right now, and it will be open until April 15th. There are 8 different groups that are looking for new members. And you can go to the City of Eugene website and just search for boards and commissions, or Google Eugene boards and commissions, and it will get you to the application. And if you have questions or problems with the application, give the city a call. We have really nice staff members who will help you. And I really hope to see a lot of folks get in applications. We've had some good years recently, and let's keep it up.
Thank you. And if that is all from the City Council, I want to thank everyone again for the evening's testimony. It's always always informative and always useful, and sometimes, you know, triggers some pretty deep responses from our counselors. So that's what public conversation is about. With that, I think we are ready to move on with consent calendar 2.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the items on consent calendar 2.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that passes. Thank you. And Councillor Keating, your virtual hand is also raised. Do you have a comment?
I do, Mayor. Just a you know, if it's a personal point of privilege, a point of information, either way, I'll state my observation, Mayor. Oftentimes we will approve a consent calendar item without referencing what it is. And I suspect and expect that not everyone is following along the agenda as meticulously as we are. It's the adoption of the resolution annexing land to the city of Eugene. And there's a link, et cetera. But for the public, next time we adopt a consent calendar item, I would just feel more comfortable. It's been bothering me for a while, so apologies for bringing it up right now in this forum, but it's on top of mind. I'd just feel more comfortable if we at least addressed what the items in the consent calendar are when we're advancing them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thank you very much for bringing it up. And it will help the public to know what we're actually talking about. Councillor Evans.
I just want to point out that Councillor Keating may not be as aware of this as maybe some of the rest of us are. We can pull that from the consent agenda to have a conversation on and vote on the rest of the consent agenda. We don't have to do anything of the sort. We can't have that discussion without, if we have other items on the consent agenda, we can pass those items and then discuss the item in question that you have issue with, and particularly around the annexation issues that you just pointed out. So there is a process for us to do that.
Right, and we intentionally keep some of these annexations for consent calendar 2 in case someone wants to testify about them in the public forum. So there's intentionality around it, but I think we could read what the consent item is, and that seems like an appropriate action so people know what we're talking about. So thank you for bringing that up. And I believe with that, we are ready to adjourn. Thank you very much for a good evening, and have a good night, everyone.